Welcome to Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing, one of the fastest growing real estate investing podcasts in the world. What if you could learn from experienced real estate investors? Find out what got them to where they are now. Get insight into their daily habits and take these insights to inspire your own growth. Each episode, Jonathan Greene shares an in-depth look at the mindful approach to real estate investing. Jonathan is a lifelong real estate investor and the founder of Streamline, a data-driven, investor-friendly, independent real estate brokerage located in Madison, New Jersey. Whether you're looking to start from scratch, get to the next level, or just for a straightforward and honest approach to real estate investing, this is the free mentorship program you can take with you anywhere. Now, here's Jonathan.
Welcome back to another episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. We have a return guest, Whitney Elkins-Hutten of PassiveInvesting.com. You got it. We're talking about passive investing. We're talking about how to build a passive investing strategy that actually fits your life. Yes, you can do it, and Whitney's going to tell you how right now. This is episode 358 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my return guest, Whitney Elkins-Hutten. Whitney is the Director of Investor Education at PassiveInvesting.com, and she's the founder of AshWealth.com. She's also the author of Money for Tomorrow, How to Build and Protect Generational Wealth, published by Bigger Pockets. She is the host of Passive Investing Made Simple. I think it is simple. Whitney, welcome back.
Thank you so much. Just glad to be on. And not everybody would agree with you that passive investing is simple. But
yeah, I think once you know what you're doing, and I did neglect to mention that though your previous episode was episode 223 in March of 2025, turning your income into lasting wealth through real estate. And now you're back. So I'm glad it's been over a year and over 100 episodes, but it's nice to bring you back and get a new lens on what's going on now in 2026.
Awesome. Let's do it.
Yeah, I wanted to start with what I've heard the term, but I know you know what it means, and I know you're going to help us know what it means. How do investors come up with what their investor thesis is? Because I know it's very important for kind of what you look at, and I think it gives investors a way to kind of set a benchmark for where they're going, but I don't know that they know how to get started.
That is, I'm so glad you brought that up. And it is one of the probably more lackluster activities, but most important activities that an investor can do. Somebody might have heard it called an investor statement, an investor thesis, investor philosophy. There's maybe like a little bit of different angle in each one of those terms, but I put it to people like this. These are all the decisions that you should make as an investor without actually looking at a deal. So I have a teenager, so I'm all the time saying, hey, let's, have these conversations. You're going to be in pressure situations. Let's, train our brain to make good decisions with a cool head, not with a hot head whenever you're like in the middle of this situation, right? Same thing with investing. When you have an amazing deal in front of us, you're not trying to take the investment and make it fit your goals. You need to define all those things first. Yeah. So I think we usually say goals, risk, timeline. That's what most fiduciary advisors in the stock market say. They kind of wipe their hands and they might ask a question, risk tolerance, what does that actually mean? But I dig a little bit deeper. Like, we want to understand, like, where are you at today? Where do you imagine your life, living your life in 10 years, in 5 years, right? I think a lot of people attach their investing to a number, a net worth or an income. When really if they don't actually understand how they want to live their life, how they want to spend their time, are they serving their portfolio? Are they doing something very active like fix and flipping? Or are they more on the passive side where they're, able to maybe stay a high earner at their job, build their business, retire even, So starting there is kind of, frame number one. Then, understanding, where do those milestones change over time? So I think we say timeline horizon. Again, what does that mean? I might say, hey, I want to go into an investment that's a 7-year timeline horizon, but if I need to be exited out of my job in 5, I need to make those two timelines reconcile with each other.
Yeah.
And then I mean, we can go through, like, I ask my investors that I coach, like, over 40 different questions down to, what's your concentration per operator, asset class? Do we even know about all the asset classes you can go into? What's your
Yeah.
fave? Where do you want to be geographically invested in? How much are you willing to invest per operator, per deal, and based on that operator's experience? And so we just blend all this together.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like most people who are just getting started will have no idea what a lot of the answers to those questions are. And that shines a light on readiness and what you need to do to get prepared. Because if you don't know about all the asset classes and you think it's just single family and multifamily, you might be missing out on a lot of cool stuff that interests you that you can, like you said, passively invest in. I personally like passive investing a lot because I can learn a lot about how the asset class works. And then if I wanted to be active later, I could be. Chances are I like it so much I'm not going to want to be, but I like the opportunity to learn without the pressure of being the operator. I think that's why a lot of people get into it, and why personally, and I want to get your take on this, why I think a lot of high earning new-ish investors are going to start with passive investing so they can keep that W2, keep it running, and just have something that they can learn from without putting the pressure, of getting 6 Airbnbs or some Section 8 rentals on their portfolio.
I'm glad you brought that up. I was talking to a physician the other day, and, he was looking at our real estate debt fund and, which is cash flow,
Yeah.
No equity growth, but that too has a place in everyone's portfolio, something that's just income producing. And he was like, well, I'm trying to weigh like between buying a multifamily building or doing single family rentals. And I'm like, why? You have a higher and best use of your time.
Yeah.
I can show you a path to exit. He wanted to reduce his hours and eventually, either start his own practice so he could sell it or exit the current situation he was in. And I was like, hey, let's keep you focused here. Let's take advantage of other people's, operations teams, expertise, the systems they've already built in order for you to, create cash flow, grow your portfolio, and kind of like you said, kind of test the waters. Like, do you even want to be active?
Right. Yeah. It looks like what they're sending me seems like a lot, and I think it is. If, you've hop in as an LP on a multifamily, you read your first month breakdown and you're like, oh, wow. That's a lot of stuff to worry about. Like, it's a big operations team. No matter how many units you have, 50 and up, you're having pretty substantial operations, especially if you're doing renovations and tracking everything. I like to see how it progresses, but yeah, I think, as I was saying, every time I see it, it just reinforces that I've really, at least at this age, enjoy passive investing. I like to kind of ride the coattails of the people who spent all their time looking at that one asset class. But I like that if I'm interested in another asset class, then I can go to an expert in that asset class. Like, you don't have to stay with one syndicator who's branching. Actually, I mean, I would say don't do that. I like them fully specialized. How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, tying it back to the investor thesis, even part of the way you can diversify is across operators, across geographic markets, across even like, how much capital do you want to allocate per deal? There's a different level of diversification that I really encourage people to look at, which is also that risk, right? I think, making sure you have your reserves in place. Honestly, like I talk to so many passive investors, even active investors that are trying to over optimize and get every dollar invested. I'm like, that's not the intent. Let's make sure we have some wiggle room, money that allows you to be patient as markets correct. And then I think there's a lot of investors that go into equity deals trying to find the magic deal, the deal that's going to give them cash flow, equity growth, tax benefits, maybe it's a fun with all the, and try to get everything in one stop shop. I have matured in my investing to understand that I want to look at those deals across my portfolio, not just within each deal, which has led me to that extra level of diversification that I started inserting in my portfolio back in 2019. And I'm so glad I did. Like, it first proved its theorem in 2020, like during COVID, and then again in the rise of interest rates. And that's that income layer, coming back to adding in real estate debt. And so you asked the question, is it prudent for an investor to, stay dedicated to one operator or to diversify? I think diversification across operators, but not so much just to diversify the operator, but also to diversify your risk in the deal, but across the capital stack. Like,
Yeah.
let's do one operator with, that specializes in equity, another operator that specializes in debt, and not try to stay with just one operator that's doing everything.
Yeah, I don't know that people realize that there's so many different levers that you can pull in passive investing. I mean, honestly, probably more than active, because active, everything's going to get harder, whereas you're just working with experts, like if you like RV parks, plenty of people who crush it at RV park. Self-storage, I know you own storage. I know you own car washes. Car washes obviously have multiple benefits because of like increased depreciation right away. But like you said, that's part of an option that you pull that lever because that's what you want from the portfolio. And don't you think the more that you work with these clients and then you look at their overall portfolio, now they can start to see, well, now I'm going to add a piece, but they can really pick a specific piece that they're looking for instead of just looking at like a million deals coming in and trying to figure out where the puzzle fits.
Well, and I think that's really what I've been trying to educate our investor base over the last 3 or 4 years. Let's not build a collection of deals, but really truly have a plan in place. And I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just, somebody who's underwritten like hundreds and hundreds of passive deals and done over 70 myself.
Yeah.
Been a general partner on, over 800 million in real estate. And that's outside of passiveinvesting.com. So, again, I go back to, we opened up with the thesis that allows somebody to actually have a plan and not just invest to have like an aggregation of like multifamily deals or self-storage deals, but really have like an understanding, how do each one of these deals match up to like my future goal on how I want to live my life, my risk tolerance, my timeline horizon, and quite honestly, my risk capacity. That's another term that I think a lot of people just don't really consider. It's not a matter of if a passive deal is going to have a challenge. It's when, right? If you're in the game long enough, there is going to be a deal that, goes sideways and unfortunately maybe south. So, let's make sure we have a plan in place to where you can, not absorb losses, but you can hit like 7 or 8 deals out of 10, and that the 2 that miss don't like throw off your entire investing portfolio.
Yeah, that's why it's good to be able to look for kind of an opposition to that type. Like you said, if you have something that's kind of more strict income, you can look for something with a longer tail there to match up against that, and you can kind of start to balance it out. That's how I think people will eventually be looking at it more. And like you said, it's not necessarily like financial advisor, it's more like financial curation. You're looking at overall. And I've always found that people who accumulate assets, like, in the old days, especially in the early days of Bigger Pockets, people are just collecting doors. They're really trying to jam in there, but they never sit back and take a look at their overall portfolio. And some people, they even get up to, 6 properties and they're like, I don't really like real estate, but it's not the 6 properties, just one. They bought one bad deal and now they don't like any of them, where if they would just sell off that deal or they didn't do it, it would be fine. And it does take a little bit of give and take in there.
I've had that deal. Oh my gosh. It was
Me too.
Kiddo who threw marbles down the kitchen sink, and then they didn't tell me about it until the pipes froze in the wintertime. Oh my gosh, it was a nightmare. Like, it was everything under the sun that happened to that property. But once I got rid of that property, I was like, oh, I actually do like
right. These other ones are all good. And I think people get too tied to the result in each one. Like, you don't, like you said, you don't have to win. You're not expected to win. If you win every one, that's not even realistic. So you try to leverage the loss. And if you're smart about it and you see one starting to tank, you just get yourself out of it if you can. And that brings me back to something that I wanted to talk to you about, because, passive investing for a lot of people, if they don't talk to experts, they don't understand the liquidity or lack of liquidity aspect, depending on what type of deal it is. And that's where I think some people can make mistakes too if they're not getting the information. They don't know it's like 7 to 10 years. They think, oh, well, if I want my money back in a year, I'll just pull it out. And most of the time, that's not the case.
Yeah, there's not a secondary market. I know there's a couple platforms out there that have the illusion of a secondary market for passive investors.
Yeah.
But really what they're doing is they have their own fund and they're trying to undercut your shares and get your shares at a very nominal price. So, if you have $100,000, you're not going to, in a deal, $100,000 worth of shares, they're going to try to pick your shares up at 40, so.
Right.
So it sounds like it's a good idea, but more than often not. But yeah, I think one that starts with the operations team to really help level set the expectations with the investors. And I know not every operations team. I mean, they are in the business to close a deal.
Yeah.
And that's, I will ask, I'm a seasoned investor and 9 times out of 10, they know I am. So they like kind of, it sounds funny if I'm asking the question, but I'm like, can I get out of this deal? And if they're not really being straight shooters with me, telling me no, that is a red flag for me. In the PPM, there probably is language saying, hey, you can come to the general partnership team and they have first right of refusal of buying your shares. If they can't buy your shares, then they can take them to the general market with the other investors. But that's no guarantee that you can exit your shares. And again, there are people that want to pick up shares at a discounted price. So, yes, I always tell investors, for what starters, if the deal says 5 years, tack on 2 more years. Just, especially in this volatile environment,
right now,
where we're heading with interest rates, or the lack thereof direction with interest rates right now, we don't know. Nobody has a crystal ball. Don't give me any money. Don't give any operator any money that you need back in a specified time frame.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking, because I think that for me, I always say that I invest in passive investments now at this age because I like to take the money away from myself, but it's not money I need. I know I don't need it. I'm committed to the ride. Because I think it's a fair question to ask, can I get out of it just because you want to know? But I think if you're thinking of that, like, I might need to get out of it, don't invest. Because the likelihood is that you can't, unless it's a fund that has a give back after a year or something. Your traditional syndication, you're going to go for the ride.
Well, especially on an equity deal. Yeah. So you're a partner, right? How would you like to go buy a house with a partner, a rental, and then all of a sudden the person goes, oh, by the way, my kiddo's getting married. We got to sell the property after a year, or I need my money back. I need you to pay me out. But that's where the unique thing, like with debt funds, that is, one, it fulfills a different itch, right? The cash flow itch. You can allow it to compound so you can get the growth. But these tend to, for the person who is a little gun shy on investing, they need the money, they don't want to lock it up. There are funds out there, ours included, that will allow you to invest. And, you can go in at a tier that doesn't allow, that doesn't have a lockup on it.
Yeah.
Now, is it 100% guaranteed safe? There are risks in debt. It just shows up in a different way. But, I toot our own horn. I love our debt fund. I use it, but that it can offer more flexibility, especially for somebody who wants exposure to the space, but needs that flexibility, needs the money back.
Yeah, like you said, it's another good balance to a portfolio. So then the more you learn overall about passive investing and all the options that are out there, you really start to figure out what's going to work. I just like the idea of piecing stuff together. I think I need to think of my own portfolio more like that, because I'm in 5 syndications, 4 multifamily, 1 wellness hotel. I like multifamily. I have no interest in it on my own. So I really but I feel like, okay, there's other things I like. I'm not sure. I don't know what's next. I don't know what I need to do. And it's always going to be interesting to keep watching, but I'm always evaluating. And I think that's the important thing for people to do as they go. I mean, that's part of what you want people to do, is continually reevaluating what they have, including what their assets are, what they have to deploy, what they need, so they don't outlay everything and then leave themselves with nothing, for bills.
Yeah, that was probably the biggest issue that I saw with investors in, 2021 through 2025. Even still today, but I mean, really the issue came to a head is they had every dollar invested and had never crossed their mind that there could be a capital call. or that, timelines might extend. Or they didn't have dry powder on the sideline in case like a great deal came along, a distressed deal came along. So, maybe you stay flexible with cash. Maybe you stay flexible with like a cash flow life insurance policy. Other like bond assets, debt assets, dividend stocks you can liquidate, debt fund shares that you can liquidate. Quite frankly, I have exposure to all of those. So depending on like what I want to liquidate and go into, I have that. But the biggest word that I would tie to all this is patience.
Yeah.
So these type of assets, those income producing assets, especially in a liquid state, allow you as a passive investor to take advantage of the environment, but to stay patient so you can find those equity deals again.
Yeah. Let's talk about debt funds a little bit. Can you just explain for people who don't know what a debt fund is, what the advantages is for the investor, because it's a little bit more liquid most of the time than the other things that we're talking about, and what they're actually getting themselves into?
Yeah. So a debt fund is a collection of loans. And those loans can be on anything. It can be on real estate. It can be on, businesses. It can be on ground up construction. Who knows, right? We play in the space of a real estate debt fund, primarily single family, fix and flip real estate. We have a lending arm. And so when you're evaluating a debt fund, you want to understand what the loan position is. Are you the first bank?
Right.
With the loan? Are you the second loan on the deal? Are
Big
you
difference.
in an unsecured position, right? You want to understand, is there any leverage on the fund? That sounds funny, but if I'm in, there are debt funds out there that are single or first position lien debt funds. Yet they take your money to the bank to go get more money to lend out. So you're no longer in first position.
I bet some people get in and they don't know that, and I would want to know that.
You would want to know that. You would, yeah. And it's legal. It is completely legal. There's, it'll say it right there in the PPM, like, hey, we can take your money to go to the bank and get leverage. So those are the first two things. Then you want to understand the asset class makeup, because that too will indicate the risk.
Yeah. Right.
So are we doing single family where you have a wealth of buyers? Are we doing more multifamily? Are we doing stabilized multifamily, bridge debt multifamily? Are we doing industrial, ground up construction, some sort of blend of all that? The higher the interest rate that you're getting on the debt fund is an indication of how much risk you are taking.
Okay, so yeah, if you're getting 18%, there's more risk there than your standard 8 to 10, 12% total, right?
Yeah, I know a very popular debt fund out there. All things considered on the surface, very well underwritten. I mean, I'm not, throwing them necessarily on the bus, but how they get to those upper double digits, upper teen returns is they actually sell off their loans to a third party, like an insurance company or a REIT, which sounds great, right? They're recapitalizing, they can go out and do it again, but those companies are buying the A-plus loans.
Right. What about the rest?
So that leaves the fund with scraps.
Yeah, exactly. Right. You're left with your lowest performers there. These are important questions to ask, though. And I do think, I know Brian Burke, and when I read Hands Off Investor, it was like, oh, there's so many questions that you can ask. So you really have to prep beforehand and narrow it down, because I had somebody, I think it was Ash Patel from Best Ever CRE. He's the host of that. I had him on, and he was saying he met someone at an event, and they said they had a 400 due diligence checklist for passive investing. I'm like, that's a little much. You're never doing a deal if you're trying to cross off 400, right? But it does take a while to get adjusted to what questions to ask, depending on what type of fund it is. And what the answers mean to you. There's one thing asking, but it's understanding the answers that are going to play a role in what you do.
Yeah. I mean, to stack on top of this, we talked briefly about the lien position. Is there leverage? What kind of asset are you going into? Also you have to take advantage of, understand the developmental phase. Does it stabilize your development?
Right.
And then, past there, I want to understand the people, the processes, and the protections on the loan. or the debt fund.
Yeah.
Who's running it? What's their background, track record? In a debt fund, you generally have two people. You have the operator raising the funds, and you have the operator deploying the funds. So you actually have to do double due diligence.
Yeah.
Processes, you want to understand, how are they running their business? Okay, this is most people don't really dive into those details so much on the multifamily side, but that's everything on the debt side, right? How are they working, establishing the credibility of the borrower, the credibility of the asset? And also, it's, again, not a matter of if a loan's going to default, it's a matter of when.
Right.
And so how are they handling those defaults and workouts? And then the protections, that's the other end of the protection, the leverage side, not leverage side, but like risk side. What's their loan to value? Are they, do they have any sort of like carve out with the borrower? Are they making them sign a personal guarantee? We love investing in non-judicial states or deploying capital in non-judicial states, and having the borrower sign a deed in lieu. That helps us avoid foreclosure if there's an issue. We also have other, caps on how much money we'll lend to certain borrowers, not only in total loan volume, but dollar per deal. So those things, those are all like the kind of little things that you want to investigate in a debt fund.
Hey, it's Jonathan. I hope you're enjoying this episode with Whitney Elkins-Hutten. And if you want to talk passive investing with her, it's pretty simple. Go to passiveinvestingwithwhitney.com. That will take you to her page on passiveinvesting.com, and there's direct contact links there. You can also scroll up to the top and join the Passive Investor Club. Let's get back to the show. Just in case people missed it, that a non-judicial state where you get them to sign a deed in lieu is because you don't have to do judicial foreclosures there. Basically, if they've lapsed, you can just foreclose because you have the deed already set in advance, right? That is a big difference. And that's a great question to ask. This is really interesting to me because I've never invested in a debt fund, but I know when it came up, I kind of thought of it, it's like, 8 to 12% fixed return. I'm like, in my head, I think like, that's guaranteed. It's not guaranteed. But, if you're looking at the other things and you're balancing IRRs and traditional syndication, and that's a projection, you assume that a fixed rate, for some reason, at least I did, like, that's a no-brainer. It should be, but that's not really the case, right?
No, we can't use the word guaranteed at all. So just to
that's a bad word.
Takes a soundbite and fiddles with that.
Yeah,
definitely not guaranteed. A well-constructed and a well-underwritten debt fund will provide a stabilized income that is
that's much better than guaranteed.
well protected, right? But it does have a nice balance when it comes to what what most people think is cash flow for multifamily. Like you said, if I can get 8%, 12% in a debt fund. Most investors I talk to, they were like, well, I can maybe go into a C-class multifamily deal in a tertiary market and get 8%. I'm like, but whoa.
Yeah.
That market gets challenged. That 8% immediately gets compressed. On the debt fund,
right.
Guess what? I'm collecting that 8% regardless.
Yeah.
Even when the asset forecloses, I'm, getting 8% all the way up until the end, or at least getting made whole there. Especially, if the team can execute on that. I think the next issue or pushback I usually get between, my people that want to do heavy equity versus like, why would I add in a debt fund is I can't get any growth. And I'm like, well, if you don't need the cash flow, allow it to compound. That's what you're doing anyways on the other side.
Yeah.
Allow it to compound. And, pull out a compound calculator. 8% with all your distributions reinvested for 10 years is a 17% rate of return.
Yeah. It's just a patience thing, like you said before. I mean, I think training people and advising them to be patient is just very difficult for people because it's, everything is faster now. When I was growing up, there was no social media. So I wasn't always like, hearing about it. I just had my dad telling me about it in the car. And he was like a no rush type of person. So I was always kind of like a patient investor. But I understand why people aren't. But the more that they can retrain themselves to look at that long term, that's what you're building for. Most people are doing it for generational wealth. Some just want, to get a boat, I guess. But a lot of us are thinking of our kids and how we're going to place assets there. And like I was saying before, part of why I moved a lot to passive investing once I was like over 50 is, okay, I want to take this stuff. I don't want to let myself do as much active. One, I don't really want to. I won't like it. It will bother me. And I want to, build up the relationships, trust the experts. And for me, so far, so good. I did a lot of due diligence, though, I think, to find what worked for me.
No, I would 100% agree. I mean, I felt like that the older my child got, and the older my husband and I got, the more passive the active I would want to be. That I would, you're full time, you're playing, you're playing offense and defense with like little kids around.
Yeah.
But now I'm, it holds true more now than ever. I just want to, be with my family. I want to be with my friends, and passive investing allows me to do that. But the misnomer here is that passive investing is 100% passive. I think the point you're driving home is, and what I'm trying to illustrate too, is that you have to educate yourself. You have to build your thesis. You have to learn about the asset class you're going into. You have to take that time to actually perform your own due diligence on the operations, on the deal. And I see so many people, join a group, or, they make some friends in the space, and they go, what are you investing in?
Yeah.
Great.
I'll get in on that.
The due diligence.
Yeah.
And in that deal probably worked for the other person, but because they had a different thesis, it may not work for you. So it is work that it's worthwhile to do. It really doesn't take that long. And I really encourage everybody to step into that space.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to do as much due diligence as possible. It is great to have the friends in there, but you can't, like you said, you may have a different thesis, and that's what's important, to kind of work on that in advance. And it's something that you keep, refinishing over the years, because times change. But I did want to confirm for you, because you have a teenager still, and mine are 24 and 22, that, you think in some ways, I thought the same, like, oh, I'll just get back, more active after they're on their own. Nope, I'm just cruising. I like to just do whatever I want to do. That's why I did this my whole life. So it's like, now I really do enjoy the passive investing for watching it. And I'll just do like a little bit of active stuff here and there, almost as fun. And I'm enjoying it more than I did when I would, be doing 2-3 flips at a time, and, I don't enjoy that. And I don't want to do it now. Maybe I've learned about myself.
Yeah, there's a season of life for everything. And, I guess, where I'm heading in the season of life is, I have, have you ever seen the jelly bean analogy, like your life in jelly beans?
Well, I like jelly beans, so I'm sure I've seen it.
Look at the YouTube video. I forget what the name of it is, but somebody did a video. They were like, your life in jelly beans. And they pull out all the jelly beans, like, the proportion of the jelly beans that you would ever have in your life. Take this much out for sleep, this much out for work, this much out for like personal self-care. This is the small amount of jelly beans that you have left to spend with like your family, your friends, and like personal growth on yourself. And you really have to be very focused on what you do. And so if you want to do active real estate, more power to you. I wholly encourage it. But I would say 9 out of 10 investors that I talk to, they should be passive.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been encouraging more people who are high income earners early to look at passive first and learn about it first, because I just feel like, look at all of us who have done, years of flipping and buying rental properties and being a landlord. And then just afterwards, why did I do that? When we got to passive, we're like, why didn't I just go with the experts and just cruise along and get, a nice return? And you have a little bit of risk, but generally, if you do a lot of due diligence, you should be okay. Some stuff went haywire, obviously, the last couple of years. But I think if you even look at the stuff that went haywire, the writing was probably on the wall in the PPM and in the questions that somebody didn't ask. Do you agree with that?
Potentially. Yeah. I mean, there are certain things that you can control, right? Did anybody know, predict with 100% certainty where the market was going? I heard out of everybody in my network, I mean, I know hundreds of people in this space. There was one person, and he's not in real estate at all. He's an economic advisor. He has his own advisory firm. And it was right after he did a webinar in our investor group, right after Russia invaded Ukraine. He was like, this is what's going to happen. He goes, I don't know if this is going to happen in 1 year, 3 years, or 5 to 7 years. And I mean, I remember writing down all the notes there. And the takeaway was even he who understood all the consequences of what had happened with COVID, the depression, kind of free money, these geopolitical pressures that were happening. He's watching and evaluating the markets. He's looking at all these asset classes in a much different lens than everybody in the real estate realm was. Even he was like, I just know this is going to happen sometime in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
So he was like, just prepare yourself. It might happen in 6 months, but and some of those things are just now coming to fruition, right? The interest rates rise, happen between 2021 to 2024. He said there would be a fallout from that. He called that there's going to be a stagflationary environment. That is what we're heading into now. Yeah. I almost kind of feel like it was like, but a clock's right twice a day, a broken clock, right? So, is this just a matter of like, he's lived through many, market cycles, and this is just the pattern that evolves. But those are the type of things that I don't think that operators don't have 100% visibility into.
Yeah, I agree.
And if we're not, as an investor, there are going to be points that you have to take some element of risk. And so that I think especially when we're start using like adjustable rate mortgages, for, deals that shouldn't have had bridge debt on them or something like that.
Yes.
You as the investor, you had that information in front of you. I, as an investor, had that information in front of me. I have to make a call,
right?
Whether that's a good situation or not. Now, if your operator was going, it's 100% conservative, and it's a guaranteed return, and nothing will ever happen. Well, one, they should never be using
run
those
away.
terms.
Yeah, that's bad news. Right
Run
there.
like the wind. But if they are, that's then a red flag for me. So
yeah, I mean, I put a lot of weight in non-real estate people weighing in. 2 episodes before this, I had Lauren Seidel Baker of ITR Economics on for the second time.
ITR.
She's one of my favorite. And obviously they've predicted something's coming in 2030. And I've been using that as a guide because they don't have a stake in the outcome. So if you're talking to real estate about, like you were saying, oh no, we're good. I don't want to hear that from them. I mean, they have to do that. They want to be positive, even if they believe it. I really want to get the outside sources. And as been talking about the whole time, I'm using the outside sources like ITR to really balance what I'm doing with my portfolio and make decisions now in advance so I don't have to make those last second decisions. Just like we were saying, you don't put the money into a 7-year turn and then need it back in a year, and you have to try to find the secondary. Like, we really have to help people plan in advance, and it all starts with where we started. It's building out what your thesis is. What is your investor philosophy? As you were saying, what do you want in 5 years? What do you want in 10? Maybe you don't know, but part of it is us as seasoned investors, we can help them figure out what it is by asking, like you said, you have these 40 questions that will flesh out the things that they really need to know. And sometimes they just may not know then. It takes a little bit of work to get there, and there's not really a rush on that.
Yeah, I mean, I say start small. Start with the top 10 questions. Sit with that information for like 3 or 4 months. Circle back to it. I mean, I'm constantly. You already mentioned this. I'm constantly involving my investor thesis. Every deal I learn that I either win, or I learn, right? If a deal is a challenge, and I will be perfectly honest. And I don't think enough investors actually admit this to themselves. Most investors only do a post-mortem on a deal if it went sideways or south. They don't do a post-mortem on a deal if they got, got what they wanted out of it, or
Right.
even close to it.
Right. They're just like, oh, thanks for the return. Let me push this into something else. No,
Yeah.
that would help though if you did that, so much so, because now you identifying the things you did right instead of just passing over it, because you may find something inside of that niche where you're like, oh, actually, that was really smart. Yeah, that's a really good point. I think you're totally right about that. No one is doing that due diligence backwards on, hey, great six. These six went well. They're paying attention to the one that went south, which was just a fluke, or a market dynamic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, postmortems, what do you mean? A simple postmortem is like, what went well? Like,
Yeah.
what didn't go so well? And what about this investment, did I do well and I need to continue moving forward?
Right.
So
take the good things from the things you've done now, start to piece them together into like a new super asset or super idea where you can blend the things that you've liked the most too. I mean,
mm-hmm.
I think sometimes people think passive investment that's like ultra boring. I find it very interesting personally, because I just love reading through what happens every month on my, things that I own a small part of, because it just gives me the transparency that I want to know that things are happening. And I think if you're investing and you're not driving the bus, you want to make sure, look, that stuff's going on. And I really enjoy it. I don't know why other people don't enjoy it as much as I do, but I'm really into it. And I read every page of the monthlies. And surprisingly, I was going to tell you before, when I was making decisions on them, I really wasn't that into the whole PDF. I was just looking at what the debt was. I was very focused on the asset and the operator, but the asset itself was really important to me. Because I grew up as an asset hunter who touched and walked, thousands of houses. Even when I'm buying into a multifamily syndication, I'm not going there, but I'm like looking at Google Maps. I'm identifying the things. I'm seeing how new it is. I got a lot of new builds, which was important to me. And I feel like maybe I didn't know it, but I was building my investor thesis as I started to go through that.
Yeah, and a lot of people do it that way. You build it moving forward.
Yeah.
But if somebody's listening here and they're just like, where do I start with my investor thesis? One, start with the questions that we've been talking about, but also go through your portfolio and look at your exposure.
Yeah.
By operator, by asset class, by geographic area, if you want to get down to that level.
I think that's really important. Geography. Don't you think so? I mean, it's also fun.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, is if somebody's in a lot of funds, it's going to be really hard to break out. I would just kind of like lump it like southeast, northeast, right?
18 different here. That doesn't make sense.
I would look at your vintage year. Like, are you in all deals from like 2021, or are you deploying capital, essentially dollar cost averaging across timelines? Like looking at that type of breakdown. I also look at risk. This is where like I assign, just a really simple, 1, 2, 3 number. 1, liquidity and reserves, my emergency, contingency plan, capital that I can get at to really immediately. 3 are all my equity. Everything, whether it's controlled real estate, passive real estate, stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, it goes into a 3 bucket. Now, there's a whole continuum of risks there. And then 2 are my solid income producing assets. These are going to be debt. I do label those as my core debt, like super conservative, like our real estate debt fund we were talking about.
Yeah.
And then more opportunistic opportunities. Like if I did invested in a second lien mortgage somewhere, something that, it's not going to give me that monthly or quarterly cash flow, but that's going to be more of an extended, it's debt, but more of an opportunistic opportunity. Most investors would be shocked at their portfolio allocation just based on doing that one little exercise.
Yeah.
If they're struggling, going, it's not, my portfolio is not meeting my goals of cash flow. And you do that exercise and they're going to be like, because I don't have any cash flow in there.
Yeah, right. I mean, that goes to everything. I mean, I think people who hold a bunch of rental properties, every year you should be running through everything, if not more, just to see how it's all performing.
Absolutely.
You can't trust your property manager on large scale. You really want to at least be in there. I mean, as you were saying, most things aren't really as passive as people think. I've found that the way that I've invested in passive, after I'm through the due diligence phase, it's been really passive, other than me choosing to read the stuff and it's gone well. But I could see that one sometime might go awry, but I'd be on board because I read every month, and that's what I think is important. But yeah, you look at all the other things and you try to balance up, like, what is as passive as this? It's really hard to say. I mean, when you put in like are your car washes triple net? I mean, if you have a triple net in a syndication, those are like as passive. Those are pretty passive, I think.
Well, we have our own property management company, so vertically integrated.
Yeah.
So no, it is not truly passive on that side of
Yeah.
things. I mean, for the investor definitely is passive. So but you're right. Like once you do the due diligence, I actually will insert that any deal that I'm going to go into, I'll automatically put it into my balance sheet, right? To ahead of writing the check, just to see how it changes all my allocation metrics, right? So I know that ahead of time.
Yeah.
And then, I write the check into the investment. And then from there, I just have all of my updates go into a file folder, and I set aside like a couple hours at the end of the month. I read them all.
Yeah.
Just, and as I read them, I just make sure that I got the distribution and I call it a day.
Exactly. Every syndication has a different folder in my email. I push the stuff in there. I read it as it goes. Then I have them there. They're all logged. And then you can obviously log into their systems. I was wondering, so you have these 40 questions. What's one question in there that people would never think to ask, that you ask people about their goals, that helps them set out that investor thesis?
There's so many.
Yeah.
I think one of there's two that I can think of. The big one that I land on really early with people is your risk capacity. Like, a lot of people
I don't
are
hear
like,
capacity a lot. Yeah, I really, yeah.
Yeah. So just because you can write $100,000 check, is that, do you have the capacity to write the $100,000 check? Like and that goes back to understanding, how your portfolio is constructed, how much percentage, what's your rule around allocation between operator, the geographic area, even to the deal.
Yeah.
I think people want to write larger checks because two things: operators are asking for larger minimum investments. I mean, that's by design, right? For a couple different reasons. But two, it's easier to do due diligence and write one larger check than it is to do due diligence on multiple deals and write a smaller check. But the capacity piece is like, can you do it? Like, one, does that throw off that are you allocating too much of your net worth? If an investor's writing a $250,000 check or a $500,000 check, is that a undue percentage of your net worth that if something went sideways or south, that you would not be able to absorb? Two, it's like, do you need any of that money back? Right? Are you kind of spinning the wheel?
That's really one of the first. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, don't invest money that you need for your kid's college fund coming up in 4 years,
Yeah.
or a wedding. I've heard it all. I mean, I invested my kid's college fund and I needed it back in 5 years. It's now year 6. Like, what? When am I getting my money back? The deal. Another one was the deal was a 5 to 7 year hold, but all your other deals exited out at 3 years, and I'm building a house. I need my money back. So those type of things you don't have the capacity to invest at that point in time.
Yeah, I agree. I never thought of it capacity wise. I always think risk tolerance, and that can be sometimes ego driven. Like, oh, I'm fine. I don't mind. It's no big deal. But yeah, if you send in 100 and you only have 25K in the bank, do people not ever think they lose their jobs also? I mean, like, stuff happens. You can get sick. There's a lot of things that you have to plan for that can happen where you can't tie up your money. I really tie up money in those that I have no need for at all. I mean, you have to, and you have to build up to get there. That's why it is, you can't think, oh, I'm, 22, I'm in my first job, I'm just going to start crushing passive investments. Yes. You're not ready yet. You got to build up. But I hope that more young people look at it, because I think it just gives a little bit more relaxed scale to building income than trying to flip a house and then build a wholesaling business and all the stuff that nobody really likes to do.
I'll take a counterpoint to that on the scaling piece, and then I'll address how I landed on the risk capacity term.
Yeah.
On the scaling piece, there might be somebody listening that it's like, wow, Jonathan, I am not a high net worth earner. You might need to build up capital in some sort of active way, right? That I wasn't. I worked in public health. Do you know how little public health workers get paid?
Right. You may need to build a snowball. I mean, you can't just get one. Yeah.
And so that was where, it was through, we lived off of one income. We were huge savers. We did hit some, key investments early on in their life cycle. We flipped. We, did BRRRRs. We recycled capital like nobody's business, but we had to build that up in order to get to the point where it was, we can actually sit here and go, yeah, like I can write a passive check and it's cool. But how I landed on that risk capacity term, it was kind of a funny story. A few years ago, my daughter was really, still quite young, but I had always dreamed of going skydiving, and I talked a big game, right? I was like, yeah, I'll skydive. It'll be great. I've bungee jumped before. That was before I had a kid. And my husband darned it all if he didn't buy a skydiving package for my birthday. And I'm like, I was excited and then I cried.
Yeah.
I was like, what is wrong? I'm like, if something happened to me, like it would destroy our family. Like we don't have the capacity for me to like skydive.
Yeah.
Like what if the chute doesn't open? He was like, oh, you're being unrealistic. And then I sat down and I showed him like it wasn't just hormones or emotions or anything like that. I like literally was like, wait a second, like, I'm driving the portfolio. I'm doing all these things. Like, are you telling me that we have the capacity for you to pick up all these activities and manage a family if something happened to me? And of course he thought, he was like, girl, you're nuts. And I'm like, I'm asking realistic questions. We don't at this point in time.
Great. Now I have a better excuse because I don't like to do anything that's risky. So it's just like, I have to examine my own personal capacity right now.
Well, and I think that's why I divide out the question, right? I am totally down for taking, risks. Like I run high altitude races. There's a real chance I'm doing one at the end of June. I mean, there's a real chance that I might like fall, break my leg, and have to be like airlifted off of the, mountain. I mean, will it happen? No, knock on wood. I'm going to do that right now. Yeah. But that's a different capacity than like me jumping out of an airplane.
You have more control. Yeah.
So it's an analogy that I throw out there, and I think it does level set, right? It kind of removes, like you said, that ego from the equation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's important. So before we hop off, tell us more about passiveinvesting.com. I know we talked about it when you were on the first time. What do you do there? And then what does passiveinvesting.com do for people?
Yeah, so my role is Director of Investor Education. And what we do at passiveinvesting.com is help investors create passive income take their active income and savings and turn it into passive income and long-term wealth. And we've built equity assets and multifamily self-storage and express car washes. Our focus right now, though, in this part of the market cycle is taking advantage of the debt part of the cycle. Debt funds perform extremely well in hypersupply and recessionary and recovery markets. All parts of the economic cycle, but really in they perform extremely well in three core phases. And that's where we're moving through right now. Yeah. And so, if somebody's interested, they should reach out to me at passiveinvestingwithwhitney.com.
Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure to have you on again. I'm glad we went again over 100 episodes and more than a year in between your last show. So it's great to have you back.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. This was fun.
Yeah, my pleasure. All right. That was Whitney Elkins-Hutten. Again, you can find passiveinvesting.com, but wait, you have a special link that goes to your link on there, passiveinvestingwithwhitney.com, right?
Yes. Yeah. If you want on my calendar.
Yeah. That's it.
Go there.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Whitney. I'm Jonathan Greene. We'll see you next episode. Thanks for sticking around to the end so you can get a preview of who's coming up on episode 359 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. And it's my friend, a return guest, Kathy Fettke. She is the founder of Real Wealth with her husband, Rich, and we talk about things that are changing in 2026 in terms of what she is advising her group to do. And P.S. at Real Wealth, they have 88,000 members. We talk all about it next episode. See you there.